I call this meeting back to order of the House Property Tax Division. The next item on our agenda is House File 2929. Chair Marquart, would you like to move your bill before our division?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move House File 2929. Could be
Thank
laid
you,
over for possible inclusion.
Thank you, Chair Marquart. You may present your bill.
So, well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. This bill has as much to do with really fairness in property taxes for agricultural land as much as it does for educational equity and funding of facilities in schools around the state. So this really attempts to correct a fairness. You know, back in the 1800s, probably 60% of the people lived on farms. In the 1900s, 40% of folks lived on actual farms. Well, today it's about 2%. We have about 2% of the population in the state of Minnesota living on farms. And yet in rural Minnesota, 34% on the average of the land value is in agricultural land, not the house, garage, and 1 acre, but the agricultural land. And so that's an average. In many of our rural school districts, that portion which comprises of the agricultural land can be, in many districts, it's 90%, 60, 70, 80, 90%. And the way our system works, especially when schools go out to build new buildings or make major renovations, they have to do school building bonds. And so therefore, 60, 70, 80, 90% of the cost will fall on one classification, and that is our farmland, classified as 2A, 2B, or 2C. And yet the population is very, very low. So back in 2017, some changes were made that they created a school building bond agricultural credit of up to 40%, saying that on these type of school bond debt services, that the state on agricultural land, again, not the house, garage, and 1 acre, but on the actual land, the state would cover 40%. In 2019, we enhanced that so that by next year, 2023, that percent would be up to 70%. Currently for taxes payable 22, it's at 60%. So this bill would raise that to 100%. And the revenue cost would be 43.9 million in 24 and 58.3 million in 25. So Madam Chair, we probably are not going to probably get there, but this is a very unfair situation. And what happens too, as farmland prices go up and a student count in a school district goes down, you have fewer students being divided into a higher land value, which the land value per pupil goes way up. It makes this school district look very wealthy and therefore receives basically no debt service aid. And so this would create, it would help solve a great unfairness that we have in our property tax system, especially dealing with agricultural land in school building bonds. It would not only correct that fairness, but basically say that no matter where you live in this state, as a student, you should deserve to have the same top-notch services as any other school district in the state. So, Madam Chair, that's House File 2929. I'll take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, there's no testifiers, but Representative Marquart knows this back and forth, so I'm sure he can answer any questions. Are there any questions? I just want to thank Representative Marquart for putting this program in place. From my understanding, Representative Marquart, when we moved from, when we created the 40% credit, then moved to 70%, we had a lot more bond levies pass. Is that accurate?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, I can attest to that just in my area, Ada, Bora Public School, Barnesville Public School, and my very own district I teach at, Dilworth, Clinton, Felton, really credited this program to passing those debt services. And these were after failed attempts. And so we have seen the percent of rural school district school bond debt referendums, a higher percent pass since this has gone into effect. And it's been bipartisan legislators in the past. I worked a lot with Representative Druskowski on this in years past and others, but been very, very bipartisan, and appreciate that support.
Great. Representative Marquart, final word.
So thank you, committee, and we'll see what we can do with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Marquart. With that, I lay over House File 2929 for possible inclusion in a property tax division report. The next item on your agenda is House File 3782. Chair Marquart, would you like to move House File 3782 before the division?
Madam Chair, I'll move 3782 for the division.
Thank you, Chair Marquart. Representative Stephenson, welcome to the committee, and please present your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for hearing this great bill, which has to do with emerging technology in the energy sector relating to energy storage. Energy storage is critical for reliability in Minnesota. I think we've seen, or has a potential critical application as regards to reliability in Minnesota. We've seen in recent years how extreme weather events and other issues can cause real problems with grid stability and reliability that could be cured by utility scale storage. One leader in this space has been Connexus Energy, the state's largest co-op. They have built an energy storage facility linked to solar up in the northern metro. And unfortunately, the tax application of that has really created a strong disincentive for this really important technology to be implemented across the state. And so this bill would correct that and make sure that our utilities have the capability to implement storage, which has both environmental and, as I mentioned, reliability and affordability impacts for consumers. Madam Chair, I do have, I had intended to bring an amendment today to delete the section of the bill relating to the refund. Unfortunately, we didn't do that in time, but it's something that I know you and I have talked extensively about, and I understand that we hopefully can address that in the division report. And with that, I do have a testifier.
Thank you, Representative Stephenson. Yes, we have discussed that, and we'll continue to. Let's see here. With us here today, we have Connexus Energy President Greg Witterbush. Mr. Witterbush, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Greg Witterbush, President and CEO of Connexus Energy. We're the largest member-owned utility. We serve about 141,000 accounts, 1,000 square miles immediately north of the cities, and we include portions of 8 counties. We're really happy that 12 state senators and 20 representatives serve constituents who are Connexus members. Today, I speak in favor and support of Representative Stephenson's bill, House File 3782. Energy storage is just starting to find application into the Minnesota grid. Its uses, costs, and values are still being understood as it's being engineered as a needed class of grid solutions for long-run affordability, reliability. It was mentioned there's a Connexus example. I'd like to place the value of electricity storage in context. Including 2022, we have served members, which include counties, cities, businesses, school districts, for 5 consecutive years, flat rates, no increase, while benchmarking in the best 3% of utilities nationally for electric reliability. We're hyper attentive to costs and have phenomenal employees that drive those efficiencies. But today, I know everyone on this call is aware of the economic challenges we're facing. All businesses must reach deeper in serving our consumers. Among the many initiatives we've built and operate since 2019, in Minnesota has the distinction of the largest solar and battery facility in the upper Midwest. It's the largest, longest performing, and only grid scale system in operation today. It is one successful strategy that's keeping our rates affordable. I had the honor on March 3rd of testifying at the House Energy and Climate Committee on battery storage. I'm not going to repeat that here because we're really touching the financial aspects, but my theme was to view batteries as a strategic tool akin to a Swiss Army knife for the grid. It has a lot of uses, a lot of tools, not just the one primary blade. Battery use is nascent today on the grid. We have identified several beneficial cases to use it. However, it's challenged. Capital costs challenge business case economics. It has application risk because it's still so new, but it need not also have risk as to property tax treatment. With earlier generation technologies, including gas, hydro, wind, and solar, the DOR has had the benefit of clear legislative direction. Nationwide, support for energy storage technology is being legislatively recognized. 12 states have enacted statutes with enabling tax treatment, 10 of which are 100% exemption, including Arizona, South Carolina, Michigan, Texas, Massachusetts. The evolving grid needs tools enabled by these kind of economics and tax rules understood by all. I encourage your support of Representative Stephenson's bill, House File 3782. Thanks for the opportunity to testify on its behalf today.
Thank you, Mr. Ritterbusch. Members, do we have any questions for Representative Stephenson or Representative Ritterbusch? Or sorry, I demoted you for President Greg Ritterbusch.
I don't know if I view that as a demotion.
Members, any questions for the testifier or Representative Stephenson? Well, Representative Stephenson, I think you got off a little easy in property tax today. I think people are a little sleepy already. Final words.
I think it's because it's such a great bill. That's why. But I appreciate the committee's time and attention and Mr. Ritterbusch for being here today. And I hope this can be included in the division report. I think it's very important for our state.
Thank you.
Oh, now I gotta talk. I mean, I gotta talk. You know, I'm just
Representative Hertags.
I'm just kidding, Representatives.
Thank you. We do need some levity today. With that, thank you, Representative Stephenson. The next, with that, I lay over House File, 3782 for possible inclusion in the Property Tax Division Report. And next item on our agenda is House File 2181. Representative Anderson, would you like to move your bill before the division?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members, and thanks for hanging in there on a Friday morning. And thanks to Chair Youakim for giving this bill a hearing this morning. Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to move House File 2181, and I do have an amendment to offer on the bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Would you like to move that amendment before our committee?
I would, Madam Chair. It's the A1 amendment, and it simply changes the date. This bill was drafted originally for last year, and need to change the date at the bottom of the bill, the effective date from 2022 to 2023. Madam Chair, that's what the amendment does.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Members, any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, please unmute yourself briefly. This will be a voice vote. All those in favor of adopting the A1 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Representative Anderson, please present your bill.
Well, Madam Chair, simply put, this bill attempts to make a small technical fix to current property tax law to create an equitable treatment of locally assessed lands that support multiple solar facilities. The issue was brought to my attention by the folks up in Stearns County, but I know it has an impact and a relevancy to counties and communities all across the state that are home to solar installations. In fact, both the Association of Minnesota Counties and the Minnesota Association of Assessing Officers support this bill. And I want to be clear, very clear, that this is not an anti-solar bill at all. It's really only aimed at providing clarity, equity, and uniformity for the treatment of multiple solar facilities on the same piece or the same parcel of land. In fact, it's my understanding that the Minnesota Solar Energy Industries Association was consulted throughout the drafting of this bill, and they support the changes being proposed here by House File 2181. And additionally, I've been told that the Department of Revenue does not have an administrative concern with the bill, and the fiscal note shows no impact in the years 22 and 23, and just negligible impact in the out years of 24 and 25. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to kick it over to my testifier, Stearns County Assessor Jeff Johnson, to provide an overview of just what this bill seeks to do. Stearns County Administrator Commissioner Joe Persky is also on the call, should there be any additional questions for him on the bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. We have the Stearns County Assessor Jeff Johnson. Please, Mr. Johnson, state your name for the record and proceed.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, committee members. My name is Jeff Johnson, and I'm the Stearns County Property Services Director. I serve as a legislative committee member for the Minnesota Association of Assessing Officers, which is an affiliate of the Association of Minnesota Counties. I'm here today to address House File 2181 and why it should be enacted. This proposal restores some much needed tax equity on a local level, since current law no longer provides for the fair and equitable assessment of land supporting multiple solar generating systems. It has importance to Stearns and many other counties because of an upsurge in the practice of clustering smaller systems on the same parcel and the inability to reclassify much of this land as commercial by assessors. Both AMC and MWO are supportive of this bill. It will close what we believe is an unintentional loophole that exists in our property tax code and foster more uniformity in the classification of these properties across the state. We have learned through discussions with our solar partners in the Department of Revenue that they do not oppose this proposed measure. In fact, some believe counties already had the authority to do what this bill seeks to do. The Minnesota Solar Industries Association is supportive of this change, while the DOR has not taken a position, but did disclose that the bill did not present any administrative concerns. MWO believes that the classification of land should be based upon its primary use. Typically, land supporting utility substations, dams, communication towers, and billboards are classified by assessors as commercial, because in many cases, the underlying primary use is no longer agricultural. As such, we believe land supporting multiple solar generating systems should be classified as commercial because its use is more aligned with the properties that I've described. During the past year, we have engaged with the general public and several industry representatives on this topic. We found that many already believed that all properties supporting solar generating systems are classified as commercial. However, this is not the case. Because current law requires assessors to classify the land supporting solar as commercial only if the system is subject to a production tax, which means the system must have an output capacity greater than 1 megawatt. I want to be clear about this bill, that it does not attempt to impose a production tax on a solar energy generating system of 1 megawatt or less. All that we are trying to do is to require the land beneath multiple systems totaling more than 1 megawatt in size on a parcel be classified as commercial. At this time, I'd like to share my screen in an example that illustrates this point.
I believe Mr. Peterson, is it okay for him to share his screen?
He should be able to,
Yep.
yep.
Perfect, great. Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you. Are you able to view
Yes, we
the
are.
screen? Thank you, Madam Chair. This parcel has 157 acres and is located in Brockway Township within 2 miles of Sartell City. It's along a county road near the Mississippi River and is surrounded by residential and agricultural properties. The land is owned by a family farm, which has chosen to diversify its operation by leasing part of its irrigated field to a solar developer for an amount well above the rent paid for tillable land. In 2017, excuse me, I'm going to change screens here. This is a close-up view, but in 2017, 15 acres, as you can see in the southeast corner, delineated by the red border, was improved with a 1 megawatt solar system. A production tax has not been paid, nor has the land been reclassified by the assessor as commercial, because the system's output capacity is limited to 1 megawatt, doesn't exceed the 1 megawatt threshold. The land is classified as agricultural, but the green acres tax deferral has ended. Last year, over 8 acres highlighted by the yellow border was rezoned to accommodate a future 1 megawatt system. If this system is built by the same or a different developer, the nameplate capacity could not be combined for tax purposes based on the current law. That would mean that more than 23 acres of land would no longer be used agriculturally, but would remain classified as agricultural. In other words, as solar gardens incrementally grow on the same parcel, the developer or property owner avoids taxes paid by larger solar generating systems and others who may pay a commercial tax on smaller rural acreages used in a similar way. I'll stop sharing my screen at this time before I conclude. Sorry, let's see here. Well, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on, but I want to conclude by saying that House File 2181 is a viable solution to Minnesota's local tax equity problem. I ask that you support this bill because it allows properties with multiple systems on them to be classified as commercial. And it does reestablish equalization without creating an incentive for solar development. With that, I want to thank the chair and members of this committee for allowing me this opportunity to testify, and I'd be pleased to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Members, any questions for Mr. Johnson or Commissioner Persky that's standing by? Representative Marquart.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Anderson, for bringing this forward. I was wondering if Mr. Johnson could tell us, just to get an idea of kind of how much value are we talking about? So like that 15 acres that has this solar garden, 15 acres, if it's farmland, depending on what it's going for, I don't know, $5,000 to $7,000 an acre or more or whatever. But let's say it at max probably 100,000 for farmland value. What would be the value of these solar gardens now? Do you have any idea what that would be assessed at?
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, Representative Marquart, the land would virtually be valued the same. However, the classification would change. And what we've done in terms of some analysis here in Stearns County is that we had found that the increase in tax would be approximately $30 to $65 per acre. In other words, on a 10-acre parcel, doing quick math, if the average change in tax would be $50 per acre, that would amount to about $500 per year. So what we're asking for is to just seek a change in the classification of the property for these parcels. In terms of how the land is valued, to be valued like the surrounding lands. It would not be increased based on a commercial use, but based on the surrounding lands, what they would bring. And in this particular area, north of Sartell, some of this farmland may be in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000 per acre. On an agricultural value, if it was subject to green acres, it would be much closer to $5,500 to $5,800 per acre.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So all right, so that makes a lot of sense. So it's just the land classification being changed. So how are the solar gardens taxed? I mean, there's a production tax, but the actual equipment, how is that taxed? I'm just not familiar with that, or don't remember how that works.
Either I might toss this over to nonpartisan staff unless, yes, Mr. Swanson.
Madam Chair and Representative Marquart. So generally speaking, these solar systems are exempt from property taxes as the personal property of the solar systems themselves. But as Mr. Johnson has sort of referred to a few times, there is a production tax for solar energy systems that exceed a certain amount of energy production, and that threshold is greater than 1 megawatt.
Representative
Madam
Marquart.
Chair, very good. Thank you so much. So again, thank you to the testifier, and thank you, Representative Anderson, for bringing this forward.
Yes, thank you, Representative Marquart. Commissioner Persky, you had your hand up.
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, thank you for hearing this bill, House members. Yes, this solar garden that was just shown to you is just north of town for me. And the farmers actually wanted to put in a solar garden with 8 megs. which would have had 8 units on that. But the company actually approached them and said, well, why don't you start with 1 meg, and that way there'll be no tax on or the change from the ag to the commercial level. Well, that went by, and now they asked to put a second one on. And you can see that if they stack them one at a time over the course of time, they will be able to have a number of solar gardens on there. Whereas if they would have put it on in the first place, they would be taxing at the commercial rate. So again, we're just looking to close that loophole. It's relatively advantageous to be putting these solar gardens on. Land is being rented agriculturally between $200 to $300 per acre. The solar gardens are getting between $800 and $1,200 per acre for that, and tying it up for about 25 years. So we're looking to see if we can close this loophole and establish a little bit more fairness. And then also with the townships, we know townships are strapped for revenues, and this also will allow more money to be coming into the townships while that land actually just stays idle with solar gardens. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Persky. And just a reminder, this is just looking at the land underneath the solar gardens. Currently 1 megawatt solar does not pay a production tax. They just pay but we're just looking at the tax of the land underneath. So with that, members, any other questions? Seeing none, Representative Anderson, final word.
Again, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks for making that clarification. We're only looking at the classification assessment value for these smaller solar farms, and they do not pay the production tax if they're under 1 megawatt. We look at this as a fairness issue and see this as closing what some may say is a loophole in the system here. It allows the assessors to classify this property as commercial if they put smaller units together and still not pay the production tax, but pay the what we feel is a more fair commercial rate on the land that the solar arrays are positioned on. So with that, Madam Chair, I would hope that we would lay this bill over 2181 as amended for possible inclusion.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. With that, I lay over House File 2181 as amended for possible inclusion in the Property Tax Division report. I will now hand the gavel back to Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Youakim. The next item on our agenda is House File 4281. Chair Youakim, would you like to move your bill before the division?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would. I just have to get a little organized here. Sorry.
Sure,
I was
Chair
trying to
Youakim.
do double duty as a mother as well. I just got a text from my daughter. She's hearing in about 5 minutes where she's matched for medical residency. So
Oh, wow.
family is really excited today. Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to move House File 4281 before the committee, and I have an amendment labeled A2 that puts the bill in the shape that the stakeholders have agreed to.
Certainly. Would you like to move the A2 amendment as well?
Yes, I would like to move the A2 amendment.
Chair Youakim, would you please describe your amendment?
This puts, sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. This puts the bill in the shape the stakeholders have agreed to between the Office of the State Auditor and some of the city groups.
Okay.
I believe
very
the
good.
phrase is peace in the valley.
Awesome. Are there any questions on the amendment? Hearing none, could everyone please unmute? This will be a voice vote on the amendment. All those in favor of adopting the A2 amendment, say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Chair Youakim, please present your bill.
This proposal was brought to me by the Office of the State Auditor. The Tax Increment Financing Division of the State Auditor's Office annually publishes a TIF legislative report that summarizes and evaluates the financial reports that development authorities must file with the Auditor's Office for each TIF district. Last year, the division had a presentation of the 2020 TIF report by the Auditor's Office. What you have before you in 4281 cleans up sections of Chapter 469 that governs TIF and has been a few years in the making. It includes administrative expenses, definitions and limits, definitions around pay-as-you-go contracts and notes, clarifies the overall pooling limit as well as the 5-year and 6-year rule, clarifies how violations are handled, and makes technical, mathematical, and grammatical corrections. Other stakeholders involved in the process have been the League of Minnesota Cities, Metro Cities, and experts in TIF that help the cities actually implement the process. With me today to walk through the bill is State Auditor Julie Blaha, Jason Nord, Assistant State Auditor, and then we also have Gary Carlson testifying in the League from the League of Minnesota Cities.
Thank you, Chair Youakim. State Auditor Ms. Blaha, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Fisher, members of the committee. I'm Julie Blaha, your state auditor, and I and the Office of State Auditor's Tax Increment Finance Division Director, Jason North, that's his long title, are also here to explain the bill. Our goal with this bill is to ensure state tax increment finance statutes match your legislative intent, and they are clear and consistent. Now, as you know, one of our functions is to oversee TIF funds, and in the course of that work, we come across inconsistencies and lack of clarity that wasn't foreseen when the statutes were originally written. So first off, we really want to thank Representative Youakim and her whole team for taking this bill on, and we deeply appreciate all the help from Minnesota Cities, the League of Minnesota Cities, Metro Cities, Association of Minnesota Counties, Minnesota Inter-County Association, Minnesota Association of School Business Officers, Minnesota School Board Association, Revenue, TIF practitioners, and others who gave their time and expertise as part of our TIF advisory group. They act as a sounding board for the OSA. Now, to be clear, this group is purely advisory. Their involvement doesn't imply support for any final product. But as you can see, the League of Minnesota Cities and Metro Cities have weighed in with their support in a letter included in your materials. They particularly really dug in to help us find solutions that would both match your intent and be workable for local entities. And with that, TIF Director Jason Nord can go into more detail.
Thank you, Ms. Blaha. Our next testifier is Assistant State Auditor, Mr. Jason Nord. Mr. Nord, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Yeah, my name is Jason Nord. I'm the TIF Director at the OSA. Good morning, Chair and members. I'll just kind of go through briefly the sections of the bill so you get an understanding of what we're attempting to clarify. So Section 1 amends the definition of administrative expenses. Current law largely defines what is not administrative expenses, which has given rise to questions over the years. And so we're also adding a non-exhaustive list of items that are included as administrative expenses, and most notably addressing that the use of increment to maintain properties that are purchased with TIF falls under the administrative expense category. We're adding a definition in Section 2 for pay-as-you-go notes and contracts, or PAYGO notes, which is currently lacking in statute. And in Section 3, we're amending the administrative expense limit to clarify its calculation relative to amounts of tax increment that get returned to the county auditor. And we're providing a partial exemption to the administrative limit when an authority uses lease proceeds, which do get defined as tax increment, for maintaining properties that they've purchased with TIF. They should be able to maintain those properties without being constrained by the limit with those appropriate funds. Section 4 corrects a grammatical flaw where the current law has a fragmented sentence by simply adding to the general rule that it's also appropriate to use tax increment for administrative expenses. Section 5 amends the overall pooling limit, which is either 20 or 25% depending on district type, but can also include an extra 10% for affordable housing when an election is made. That's usually referred to as the 2D election. So we make technical clarifications and clarify its calculation, again, relative to amounts of tax increment that get returned to the county auditor. In Section 6, we're amending the 5-year rule with some clarifying language, and we're deleting some obsolete language that reference biotech zones. And we're deleting the reference here to the extra 2D pooling for housing because it's better addressed in the changes that we're making to the 6-year rule. So then in Section 7, we are making a number of changes to the 6-year rule. There's a lot of complexity here, and we're doing a lot of things to try and make it better. First of all, we're removing the extra annual limitation that has been part of the 6-year rule. We've found that that's difficult for people to understand and monitor, and it's difficult to oversee, and the value of it over and above the overall pooling limit may be questionable. The rest of the changes clarified the requirement to decertify a district when sufficient increment has been collected to pay off obligations. And in short, we replace ambiguous language with a clear calculation, addressing a whole bunch of details. We address how pay-go notes should be treated with respect to the requirement. We clarify the timing and process for making decertifications under the provision. We grandfather any existing bonds that may be out there to fund pooling expenditures. We provide language, and lastly, we provide language that helps ensure that the extra pooling for housing, for affordable housing under the 2D election is not unduly curtailed by an early decertification. Section 8 then corrects a mathematical flaw in the pooling for deficits provision in current law. It is meant to define a deficit as being one amount minus the sum of two other amounts, but it's currently expressed as the first amount minus the second amount plus the third amount, which for math lovers, you know that that's incorrect. So in sections 9 to 11, we're just making some technical corrections to the violations statute in the TIF Act. Section 9 removes an obsolete sentence. Section 10 streamlines some language that was a lengthy artifact of old changes. And Section 11 amends the provision for expenditures in violation of TIF limits to refer to the whole TIF Act instead of just the one section that has most of the limits under the TIF Act. So with that, I'd be available to help answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nord. Our final testifier is Mr. Gary Carlson. Mr. Carlson, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to testify on House File 4281. We did, Patty Nelman from Metro Cities and I did submit a letter, so I'll be very brief. I'll just say that 4281 makes the regression analysis in House File 4064, the LGA bill, seem simple. And so we do really appreciate State Auditor Blaha and Mr. Nord for all of their hard work in convening the group that worked on this. We think it's a good bill that deserves merit and should be included in the division report. With that, Mr. Chair, I could stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Are there any questions for Chair Youakim or the testifiers? Seeing none, Chair Youakim, do you have any final words on your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all those involved. I did not need to give short shrift to the counties and their work. This bill makes improvements to an important tool our cities use to help redevelop properties and expand their tax bases, which in turn can lower property taxes in their jurisdictions. Thank you for your consideration, and I would appreciate your support.
Thank you, Chair Youakim. With that, the chair lays over House File 4281 as amended for possible inclusion in a property tax division report. I will hand the virtual gavel back to Chair Youakim.
Thank you, Representative Fisher, for your help today. And next up, we have on our House File 40. Sorry, I am lost in my notes here. Thank you. Sorry about that. Next up, we have Representative Schultz with House File 3678. Chair Marquart, would you like to move House File 30? Oh, I'm seeing a note from the CA that Representative Schultz is just about to jump on. Members, we have a little bit of time. Why don't we stretch our legs for 5 more minutes and come back at recess until 11:15. So just 11:15 so we can make sure we get Representative Schultz on. I know she had another committee she was in, so be back at 11:15. We are in recess.